Well, hello there. Good evening. It's now 6:30. I think it's time for us maybe to begin. So I would like to welcome all of you. It's good to see some of the same faces that were here last week. Is that better? I'll make sure that everyone is hearing well this week, because we had some feedback from people that they had a little bit of difficulty hearing at times last week. So we'll try to remedy that this week. So welcome or welcome back. If this is your first time, welcome to this time and space so that we can learn together, or your second time. And we hope to see your faces again. These sessions are being Zoomed, so if for some reason you cannot make it in person, you could Zoom in the upcoming 2 weeks that we'll have next week, next Wednesday, and then we skip a week, and the Wednesday then after that, April 9th, I believe it is. So just be aware of that. Even if you cannot make the Zoom, the sessions are also being recorded. So you can find those on the church website. Lynette has created a tab for Wednesday Night Connections. So if you go to that page, you can see the presentation. It's already posted from last week. Excellent presentation by Tom Deluge, who was here from the Doherty House. Thank you. Yeah, I was blanking the Peter Doherty House. Why did I blank on that? I know, I've greeted him and he's back this week, so glad to see your face again, Tom. Thank you. So this Lenten series was put together by the Racial Justice Working Group of this congregation. By the way, for those who may not know me, I'm John Wachter. I'm a member of the congregation and the Mission Committee, and also the Racial Justice Working Group. And it was that Racial Justice Working Group that worked at putting this series together for Lent. And in particular, I'd like to thank those who worked on it. Nancy Schulte, Barb Morrison, Rachel Starkenberg, Lucy Wechter-Webb, and Gail Landfair, myself. So a special thank you to them. Now, in 2022, the Racial Justice Working Group put together a priority for this year, 2022. And this is the statement: reckon with the missional and colonial history of this land, specifically Presbyterian's role, and work to build a relationship with the Native American community. At this time of Lent, we hope to bring that effort in earnest to reckon with the past, and for that purpose, we bring these 4 speakers to this series, which is entitled Place, the Land, the Church, and the People Where We Live. I mentioned we had Tom last week. This week is Mark Wilson, who is both Tribal Vice Chair of the Tribal Council for the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, and a City Commissioner in Traverse City. And week 3 will be Reverend Lucy Wechter-Webb, who will specifically focus on the doctrine of discovery and the Presbyterian Church's involvement in the colonization of this place we call America, and here locally Michigan. And week 4, April 6th is the date, excuse me, I said 9th, will be Eric Hemingway, who is the Director of the Department of Repatriation, Archives, and Records of the Little Traverse Band of Ottawa Indians. Eric will speak about the boarding schools for Native Americans that were operated in this region. So I'm going to repeat some of this. If you heard it last week, you're going to hear it again. Maybe there'll be soak time with it. Reckoning with any history is to examine past events in the context of those who wrote the history. In the introductory text of the Our Peoples exhibit in the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C., the curators drew a clear distinction between the past and history. They wrote, "The past never changes, but the way we understand it, learn about it, changes all the time." It is not the goal of this series of lectures to pit the history reported by one group against the history of another group. But we need to recognize that whose history becomes predominant is affected by power. Those who are the holders of power have often used it to shape written history for their own purposes. The Our Peoples exhibit at the Smithsonian was put together in collaboration with Native American people. And they describe something that's quite a bit different than maybe the tales of decimation that we seem to be so familiar with as white America. They instead describe the chronicle of indigenous people as a survival story that is one of the most extraordinary in human history. George Erasmus, a respected Aboriginal leader from Canada, said, "Where common memory is lacking, where people do not share the same history, there can be no real community." In that spirit, at this time of Lent, we pray that this series may work to be confessional in nature. This is because we recognize that racism is at its very root a spiritual problem. Therefore, we hope to reckon with the histories that have been told, the histories that have not been told, and our own church's power in the mix of those things. Caveat, the series is designed to be more challenging as we go along, so fasten your seatbelts, but stay with us. We believe you will be blessed, and perhaps hopefully inspired to action. If you're not a member of the Racial Justice Working Group already, I believe there's a sign up on the back table, and if you'd like to join us, please put your name and contact information on that list. Thank you again for the gift of your presence tonight. And now I'd like to turn it over to... Thank you. We talked about all this, but I promptly forgot.
Thanks. It's amazing what a crowd of people can do to your memory. I have that too. Before we dive in tonight, we want to take a moment for land acknowledgement. So please receive these words. As we gather tonight, sitting on this particular patch of land, we remember that the land has a history, a present, and a future. Long ago, before any brick was laid or concrete poured, there was likely a tree standing right where each of our feet rest now. Here it was likely a white pine, a red pine, or a hemlock. This land was covered with the forest, which was home to so much life before the trees were clear-cut in just a short span of a few decades. The trees here were called green gold by the lumber barons. As the trees came down at the hands of the white communities who settled on the land, the people native to this land had their land stolen and experienced ethnic cleansing and genocide. Tonight, we gather on the ancestral lands and the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe peoples. This land was stolen by a people who thought ownership of the sacred earth was theirs to take. In 1839, Peter Dougherty, a Presbyterian minister, was sent to this area by the Presbyterian Board of Foreign Mission to establish a church and a school. It was the establishment of this mission alongside the development of white settler communities in the area that in part grew the wealth for this church. Our land access, this building, the endowment, and our power locally all grow out of that history at the expense of indigenous sovereignty and indigenous life. As a Presbyterian minister, I acknowledge and confess the harms of my spiritual ancestors for the violence that has occurred in the name of our spiritual tradition as the first Christian mission in the region where we reside. Many of these truths about the past we are still learning and recovering. So tonight we offer deep gratitude and respect for the elders past and present of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and the Potawatomi peoples, call Turtle Island home. We give thanks for their stewardship of the land, for protecting the water, for remembering that we are all part of this great home we also call Earth. We offer gratitude today for the ways they continue to lead toward right relationship with the earth and with each other. We give thanks for the ways they continue to teach us and lead us toward collective liberation. This time I want to invite Lucy to come forward and lead us in the grounding.
Jordan. So we've already said some difficult things into this space. And one of the things that we're learning, and those who have done racial justice work for much longer than I have are learning, is that these things actually live in our bodies. And that the systems of oppression that have made racism, white supremacy, colonialism real in the world have a culture about them that have actually sustained those realities over time, and that culture lives in our bodies. And so we have to tend to our bodies as we dwell in this work and this conversation in an ongoing way. And so I invite us to really just simply come back into our own bodies for just a moment, to ground physically in this place, and to feel the support underneath us as we move more deeply into some hard conversation together. As I do this, I invite always radical consent, which is consent with even your own body. That if something doesn't feel good to you, you listen to your own body and offer consent to yourself. So if I ask you to close your eyes, you can choose not to, right? If there's a part that I cue up that you pay attention to in your body and it doesn't feel good, you can choose something else. I will offer some invitations here in this grounding in the next couple of minutes. And however your body leads you, I invite you to greet your body again in this moment, knowing that these systems require us to actually distance ourselves from our bodies. If you're comfortable closing your eyes, I invite you to start there. If that doesn't feel available to you, you might just cast your eyes downward, or even kind of blur the edges of your vision. And I invite you to begin by first just locating the rise and the fall of your breath as it comes into your body and leaves your body, without any need to change it or judge it or make a story about it. Just observing the ruach, the breath that comes in and out and makes you alive. And then I invite you to feel for the parts of your body that come into contact with the supports that are underneath you. Your feet, your butt, your back. Feel for the solidity of the floor and the chair, the wall, wherever you may be located. And see if you can release just another pound into that support. Maybe even inviting a sensation, whether you move your body or not, just even the sensation of back and down. And then from this connectedness to the supports which are most immediately underneath you, I invite you to connect to the soil and the earth that is beneath those. In this time, it is a loosening soil in our land, one that is wet with mud and the spring melt. And as you feel for the aliveness of that earth, I invite you to imagine roots extending down from your body into the support of the earth. And being curious about where those roots take you. Are they one long, deep taproot? Are they small tendrils reaching outward toward the lives that are near you? Feeling for the connection to the land. and to the other forms of life which are also connected to that land. And I invite you to just take a few more deep breaths here, feeling the unconditional support of that earth, knowing that it has the ability to carry the heaviness of our grief and the deep joy that we also carry as human beings. And if you've had your eyes closed, you can take your palms together in front of you and rub them together, sort of charging them up with a bit of energy, and placing them over your eyes to sort of cup the front of your face, feeling the warmth and the energy on this frontal part of our brain, which works so hard day in and day out, allowing that energy to nourish this part of our brain. And when you're ready, to open your eyes into your hands first, allowing little bits of light in, and allowing your body to take the time that it needs to adjust to the light. And then as you bring your eyes back online, inviting you to just kind of orient to the room a little bit, taking in the people who are here with you, the materials of the earth that are here in this room, the ones that have been harvested from the earth and make up this space. And then locating even beyond the walls of this place, remembering where we are located in this broader land and community as we enter this conversation together tonight. Thank you. Gail, I invite you to offer the introduction for tonight's speaker.
I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. It's my pleasure to introduce Mark Wilson, who is Vice Chair of the Tribal Council for the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. He is also a commissioner for the city of Traverse City, and I thought, what could be better than someone who has a voice and a stake in the two different entities, two different places. And I didn't know him at all, and I saw his picture in the paper and read an article and decided I had to have him come and speak and hope that he would say yes. And he did do that. So Mark has a master's degree in public administration, and he has his own media company that focuses on positive results, things that he sees that we need in this community, in this area in northern Michigan. He is married and has 2 children, both teenagers. And I think that gives you a pretty good idea about him. I'll just let him take it from here. So thank you, Mark. Excuse me. You have your own.
I do. Thank you so much. Who's you? Ani, Anishnagegi. Hello, how are you? Yeah, I'll start out with sharing a little bit of our language, because our language isn't supposed to be here. As the fire still burns, it is still here. And when I do, maybe I'll interpret a little bit of what I've said, and there's conflicting views and teachings from some of my peers that would say, use the language, you don't need to interpret the language. But then also, I feel that and I've been taught, and trust who taught me, share the language as much as you can, use it, teach it. So, Ani, hello. Anishinaabe, how are you? Bonjour, Gajimadu. Hello, Creator. Mayan Adishnaka, Sodawa, Anishinaabe, and Dao, Godam. I am called Wolf. It's my Anishinaabe name. I'm a Balloon clan, and I'm Odawa Anishinaabe name. Chimigwech, Gajimiyang, Minagijigat. Thank you so much for this great day. And today, I truly mean it, because if you look out the window, this is the day that I wait all February for, and I really struggle with that. And so here we are. It feels a little weird with this on. This is like my first time ever doing one of these. So I feel like the only time I've ever seen one of these is like one of those like motivational, trying to act now. And I get you. And I want to give kudos to Gail for sitting down with me and reaching out to me. She was a great ambassador on your behalf to get me to come here today. So, you're okay. You know? And so she was pretty cool. You guys got to be pretty cool too. So I came on down and shared a meal with me, and I appreciate that so much. And everybody's been very personable, which is great, because the least that I wanted was anybody coming in. So what are you going to say? And then as I thought about that when we came in, I kind of plotted my exit. I need to get out. Yeah, I'm not supposed to be here. And I'll tell you that I'm the first in my father's bloodline since the Indian Removal Act that was raised at home. So my father was taken from his home. He was one of 16 children. And June and I had a discussion about kids and cousins beforehand. And I feel very blessed to be raised here with so many cousins, so many first cousins. My grandfather was one of 7, and his brother, for example, had 13. So lots of Wilsons. My grandmother was an Anderson, and I don't know who the original Anderson was, but he spread his seed. So there was lots of lots of Anderson cousins. I'll take you guys back to first 1836. This is the history as I know it. I'm not one of the tribal historians by any means. I'm just trying to share history as I understand it the best I can. My mother will watch this later and correct me. 1836, some leaders from the Grand Traverse area, Odawas, and had gone to Washington, D.C. to negotiate a treaty with the federal government to exchange some land and exchange for resources. And I'll go over it very quickly, but it was to our disadvantage to go to D.C. and do this. So we got 30 Odawas, Ojibways that go to D.C. to negotiate versus some of the other tribes, Minnesota tribes, that would have successfully negotiated their treaties on their home territory. Couldn't be necessarily strong-armed into any agreements. But nonetheless, 1836, we make an agreement that gives up 14 million acres of land. And that goes from, we love Michigan, everybody know it. So you got the Grand River down in Grand Rapids, comes over to Alpena, and then nearly all of the UP. And in exchange for certain plots of land, reservations, and the ability to exercise our way of living. So the means that we use to sustain ourselves. Part of our original treaty reservation was the Old Mission Peninsula, and that lasted roughly until 1855, at which time, 1837, as you all know, Michigan became a state in the Union, and come 1855, we had renegotiated after Reverend Doherty had come and moved the Grand Traverse natives from the old mission to the new mission. And I'm not fluent by any means in Anishinaabe, but I am told that Reverend Doherty was known for saying things like, "Is that so?" Which is the literal translation of Omina. So, could be wrong. Somebody will correct me if I am. But for tonight, that's how I know it. I heard it. I repeated it. I'm gonna live with that. I like it, especially because sometime a decade plus ago, the cousins on the res started saying "is it" all the time, but not in like the proper response, like, you know, this podium is made of wood. Oh, is it? Yes, it is. But it's more like, Jan went to the store. Oh, is it? Like, oh, Mina. Unfortunately, the land was once was somewhere that we were kind of shoved to live our lives, became something that was recognized for the trees and agriculture. People changed their mind. They like to have that land. And I can't get too deep in detail. I'm not the tribal attorney, and they know this inside and out and repeat it constantly. But there was a BIA agent named Henry Schoolcraft who was in charge of administering the lands and programs for the Anishinaabe of the area. And if you trace every deed in Leelanau County from our 1855 treaty area, you'll find his name attached to them. And that's because our reservation was transferred. It was supposed to be held in trust in perpetuity by the federal government, and it wasn't. They were not our trustee, and over time, it was dwindled down. And sometimes it was from things as simple as trying to get us to be sophisticated and get us to sign for loans on an organ for our house. A sophisticated house has an organ, so you signed this loan, but you didn't realize you were signing a quitclaim deed to your house. Others were in the wintertime, it gets rough. You move in to hunt and get away from the lake and the lake effect weather. You come back, you get told you abandoned your lot. You weren't here, which is incredibly ironic because a lot of those properties, some of those people are about to come back next month. So, and I say we all go post up. You abandoned your lot. You weren't here. What happened? Yeah, do you? Do you? Yeah, Glen Lake is beautiful. And so we were all but decimated, and we tried twice to prove that we were still here. In 1934, we tried to organize and were denied. And in 1943, we tried to organize again and were denied. But then in the 70s, there was the fishing wars. And this wasn't unique to just our area. Out west it was happening. In Canada it was happening. And it was part of the agreements were for our peoples to exercise their rights to sustain their lives. We had certain ways that we fished, certain ways that we hunted and that we gathered. A gentleman by the name of Arthur Duhamel was our sacrifice, if you will. He was our test case, and luckily we had some good attorneys that came and said that if you step up and do this, we'll do our best to protect you. And he was exercising his fishing rights, and he called the Michigan DNR and invited them to come arrest him, which they did. And that proceeded to challenge in court for a true interpretation of our treaty. And in 1979, there was a historic decision by Judge Fox to say that our treaty rights were upheld. I've been blessed. Very, very privileged, just like in George's acknowledgement about how everybody here is privileged to be here and to have this great facility and all the things that we have today. I'm blessed because I was born in 1979. And all I know is the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians my whole life. And the tribe got its reaffirmation in 1980. We, at that time, were dwindled down to 12 acres of land. 12 acres. And if you have any understanding of how governments are sustained, how we pay for programs, it's usually through a tax base. So you have citizens that live somewhere, they pay their local taxes, you take those local tax dollars, hopefully spend it in benefit of the citizens. It's hard to do with 12 acres. And it's hard to do without a workforce. Through termination era, a lot of our citizens had moved to cities to find work. That's how I was born. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My father had gotten in trouble in school here at GC Central, and he was about to age out of foster care. Anyways, kick him out. And a group stepped in and found an Indian school training in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for him to find a career. They sent him there. He met my mother, who is of Sicilian descent. And, yeah, both my sisters were planned. It was a good child. But you know, like I said, born in 1979, in 1980, the tribe gets reaffirmed, and there's a little bit of movement. There's something to come home to. And my father brings us back here. Raised in northern Michigan, and my father had a good career with the tribe, amongst other things. He went into his trade for a while too, tool and die. But for some of my youth, he was a conservation officer, which meant he would help govern some of our ceded territory. And I didn't learn until I was about 32 years old and really started paying attention that was a really dangerous job for him in the 80s. It was incredibly dangerous. There was such animosity and conflict over tribal members exercising their treaty rights that truly put yourself in harm's way to go out and try to police this and to stick up for tribal members when they're fishing and somebody doesn't necessarily agree with it. And you know, across all the territories, it would be gunshot, boom, boom, oops, I didn't know you were standing there. Well, I laugh, but it's just the only way I can accept that was something that happens. In 1984, a group of tribal elders were talking about testing our sovereignty. You know, we had established our sovereignty through our treaty rights and understood that that the land that we had left was was sovereign land, and that our rights were accepted in perpetuity. And we realized, with no tax base, how do you fund a government? And the best way they figured out, and it's still doing the best job it can to this day, was we opened the Leelanau Sands Casino, Shabbytown, Michigan. And if you go up there today, the Shabbytown, we have our administration buildings, and it really, to me, kind of doesn't make sense. It's like, we understand how villages are laid out today, that there's a better way of structuring things, but at that time, we just kind of got money and put a building somewhere. It's just kind of wherever, so even to this day, well, I'll get into the utilities in a minute, but if you go to what is now our accounting building, you look at this little structure, was the first Native American casino, and it was a magical time. There was actors, celebrities would fly here to go see this little casino. Serving on the council today, I try to imagine a time when people would pay admission. And they line up all the way down the block to wait to get into that casino. Yeah. I could go on and on. I do want to leave some time for question and answer, but I did say I'd say something about the utilities. There was a period of time there was a lot of disharmony between our neighbors. So as we bought up plots of land, the way that it happens is we buy our land back, and then we petition the Secretary of Interior to put it into trust. And what that means is it comes off the tax rolls. It ceases to be the state of Michigan and becomes Grand Traverse Band land. And as we did that, the surrounding municipalities didn't like it so much. And maybe we're a little intimidated. How much land are they going to buy? If they buy more land, are they going to put another casino there? Are they a lot of things unknown? If they buy land here, this happens to this day. We bought land across from West Senior High in Traverse City. We applied for trust for the first time in history. Grand Traverse County didn't battle us on it. But the neighbors came and threatened to sell their houses because the reservations coming in. I don't know if they expected us to put a bunch of trailers there. And I told one of our contractors who said that he was kind of being harassed by that. I said, well, tell them we'll be interested in buying that. They said, well, it might be a great idea. We'll go put an old GTO on bricks. Right behind. Oh man, the natives are coming. You gotta run. So in their being upset about us buying the land, as we ran utilities, they didn't keep track of them, and we didn't keep the best track of them. So basically, it was like, well, it's your land now. We put your electricity in. You keep track of it. Maybe we didn't. My predecessors didn't have the expertise in this land development. So 10 years ago, we're trying to redo our health clinic. We're digging a hole, and then boom, power goes out in all of the Shabbytown. Like, oh, well, that's where that's at. Somebody write that down. We got that right there. We're gonna keep an eye on that. You guys are good. I was really nervous. I had one other speaking engagement before this, last week, and I was really nervous because normally I thrive in a crowd and have a great time. That's how I think I got elected. But I was like super nervous. Like, I forgot about COVID. We haven't seen each other in so long. I'm like, hi. They asked me to come do some opening remarks at the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Summit, Traverse Connect. It's great. I'm glad that the local business community is doing the same, something similar to what you guys are doing here tonight, and getting together and having these discussions. And they invited me, and they said, last year, we invited your former chairman, and he came. He gave a Christian prayer, and we were kind of hoping that we didn't have that this time. And I waited until I was on stage to kind of call them out on their misconception or their definition of an Indian and the means to put us in a specific box. So, for instance, for anybody familiar with the tribal boarding schools, how I explained all the elders before me had been taken from home, and some of my cousins, even as recent as the 80s, still. And, okay, if you're forced into a religion, that's never cool. But tribal citizens are of many walks of faith and are of many races and many political affiliations. And there's things to consider there. So, like, you look at me, I go walking down the street. I bet before tonight, if you guys didn't know me, you wouldn't look and be like, no Dawa man right there. I might be a little bit more ethnically ambiguous. I go on the West Coast, they think I'm Cuban. Wherever. Yeah, that dude keeps a good tan year round. I have a beard. That's not typically the traits of a full-blooded Native American man. But, so you have that. You have people that you see that are racially Native. And you have people that are spiritually, religiously Native. And you have people with the politically Native, as in they have a membership, an enrolled member of a tribal nation that's got a direct government-to-government relationship with the state, the feds, and the local units of government. And sometimes you can be all three. Sometimes you're somebody who follows our traditions and you don't have the drop of Native blood. Sometimes you're somebody who's full-blooded, but you were adopted away and you don't know much about your tribal customs. That's okay. Sometimes you're somebody who totally follows the way. You're visibly racially Native, but you're not an enrolled citizen of any tribe. That's okay. You're still. So I said to them, you guys invited a Pentecostal preacher to come do a prayer for you, and you got upset that you got a Christian prayer. And that sometimes you can't just try to make us be your token Indian, like we're, and I was hoping to break some of those stigmas. They gave me 5 to 7 minutes. I think after like 21 minutes, I had left the building. But it was really important to me to explain that because I think that helps. And then before leaving, I gave him a prayer, and there's nothing else. Got to give the people what they want. This is what you came for. But beforehand, Marky's going to give you what you need. Yeah, there's a lot more. I may be forgetting. I didn't want to come here and read off the notes and just get lost. And maybe you guys have some things you're curious about that I could help share. I was assured that nobody would ask me how did they get any of the money. Like the casinos, right? They give out money. But if anybody would want to ask anything, I'm an open book. I'm here. I got a lot of things I'm willing to share. Gail spoke to my master's degree. I'm proud of that. It's cool. I figured out how to be a student eventually, but before then, I was a high school dropout, an anxious young man in a school that although I'm not the brownest skin walking around, there were plenty of kids that were sure to remind me I wasn't white. My family's been victims of legitimate hate crimes. Windows being smashed out of our home, baseball bats being swung at my nephews, swastikas being carved into my car. Okay. Well, yeah, yes. Well, I'm thoroughly aware of the abuse, and I'm also like as we said, as Jordan had said about some of this is like in our DNA still today. So like some of the things that all of us, I mean, all of us have done things in our lives too that we're just like incredibly ashamed of. And I'm not going to stand here and act like I was the best kid growing up, and that there's not some people around here. No, nobody deserves that. Um, but yeah, so what we call it is historical trauma, and that's a situation where um, you have a traumatic event and some abuse that continues, and you take a man's children from him and you tell him you're not fit to be a parent. After generations and generations of parenting the way they did, that causes a lot of stress. And then you take these kids to somewhere else and you get mad because they're not acting the way you want them to, so you beat them, you hurt them, and yes, of course, but that's a whole nother the sexual the sexual abuse is something that can and should be addressed constantly, but that's a like even another discussion based on just the practices of them at the time, the repression. Maybe I have my own arguments for that. But you take somebody from the man's children, the woman's children, you tell them they're not good parents. We're going to teach your kids. You beat the kids. The kids come home. Now the kids don't act good at the school. They're beat. Get sexually abused, either by the teachers or by older kids. Come home. They don't know how to act at home anymore. The parents beat them because you're not knowing how to act. And then that continues. And then those kids, a lot of abuse turns to other things to help you cope. Alcoholism, other things that help you just kind of deal with it. And that continues today. Just goes on, and that you have some kids that they weren't shown how to be parents, and then they have kids. And my grandmother has 16 kids. She wasn't taught any better. And neither was my grandfather. They just never really got it fully together. And, tell you, my grandmother was homeless often in Traverse City. I have a special place in my heart for Safe Harbor. And even despite the political controversy over its location, I know that my grandmother and several of my elders and even some cousins have been most comfortable under that trestle in their lifetime. My father was an alcoholic. He was raised in the foster care system. He was the fourth of those 16 kids. So he wasn't adopted away. The first 10 were, first 8, my mom will correct me, were Wilsons, and many others, my uncles. Only 3 of them were girls. So one of my aunts had been adopted away. She's not much older than me. That many kids. Eventually, the kids' start. Oh, you're my aunt. Sweet. Yeah. Her kids and my kids grew up. But so I don't like really blame my parents too much. I feel blessed for my mom. She recognized what was going on and how the cycle needed to be broken, and she stayed sober my whole life. That inspired me. I got it together a little late, but at 23 years old, after the birth of my first son, I had my last drink, last hit of marijuana. I've been sober ever since. Kind of got more addicted to college and fitness, which has its own challenges. Work. But yeah, that's how the trauma gets handed down, and it's not just unique to the tribal community. There's several other communities that face that same type of abuse, and it continues on and on and on. There's a movie on Netflix called Indian Horse, and I strongly recommend that. That's a really good example of Indian Horse. Yeah, it's. I think that's a really good example of what I'm talking about and how to.
And Mark, I know we have one question over here. I'm going to,
Gotcha.
or maybe a couple or three. I'm going to ask one before I pass the mic on. You mentioned that when you purchased land here locally, sometime the township or the county didn't appreciate that because of the loss of tax base.
Yeah.
I know the Seneca Indians in upstate New York lost a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court on that issue, and they had to pay tax on the land that they purchased. I believe it was even adjacent to their reservation, existing reservation, and they wanted to incorporate it. My question is, was there ever any legal challenge to that locally here when you guys
Yes.
purchased land?
Yes.
And the outcome?
We've had several. There's the United States versus Engler, I believe, was the lawsuit. Governor Engler, with when we opened Turtle Creek, it was a really really gutsy move on behalf of the tribal leadership at that time, because that's one of those things that we're going to take this to court. So we believe we're right. This is our land, and if we lose, somebody might be going to jail. The same as the fishing rights. Somebody did go to jail. We fought it out, and luckily justice prevailed. We've had other parcels that took a decade plus to get into trust, or even longer. One we call the Hoxie parcel off of M72. Took a very long time. It was challenged by Grand Traverse County, and we had to fight that out. I say we, the Grand Traverse Band. It was before my time. I was younger and not as interested, young gentleman. But then we also have other properties that aren't in trust. I mean, we own a building right next door here at, down the block here on 3 Mile. Pay taxes on that building. We have the Grand Traverse Resort. So lots of acreage. And that's all in what's called fee simple, which just means buy it for a fee, and that's your property. Makes us one of the largest taxpayers in the county. If not, definitely happy. But there's other issues. We've tried to do non-trust developments. So we partnered in a development out there by Myers that you'll see. And that's 160 acres meant for retail development and mixed housing, and kind of build a walkable village. And some of the partners have been trying to get that done for 20 years. And every time we thought we were close, and especially once the tribe bought in and said, hey, this is a good development, we'll definitely be part of this. We had issues with Acme. It just didn't work out. So eventually it just seemed better that we'll apply for trust status, and now the tribe will be the government over that land. So now we've ran all our infrastructure through there, and how that development goes will be dictated by the tribal government. You had a question?
Yeah. So part of what we're interested in is telling the truth, and perhaps even recovering some of the history of Peter Doherty and the first mission upon this land. And so we had Tom speak to the Doherty House, history of Peter Doherty and the mission. And I would love to hear, what's the story that gets told about Peter Doherty in the Grand Traverse Band, or is there one?
Not really. At least not to the kids. As I was raised, I didn't learn much about Doherty until I was over 30. And even then, it's never been very negative. Like, I don't hear of him as a figure that was abusive, but that doesn't mean that that's the truth. I just don't know. I'm not an historian of such. Well, before, there's a question right behind you, but
Yeah.
Was that something that I should have came last week to hear? Like, is that something that? No. Other than moving us from beautiful Old Mission Peninsula, they're gonna grow some cherries over there. Yeah. Yeah. At that point, it's kind of one of those things where it's just like, this is what's happening. You know, it's not necessarily like somebody wants that, but it's just what was happening.
There was a published history that I found online that was written in 1877 that talked about Doherty's motivation to have them move to Omena was because they could purchase land there. And this place where the federal government was not going to make available for purchase. And so he was advising them, if you want to retain or own land, save the allocation of funds you get from the federal government. We're going to go to Omena and you're going to own land. So it was applying what was the European model of fee simple.
Yeah.
Right? But which was foreign probably to their concept. But that was his advice, and that's why they moved to Omena, because they could purchase land there.
So maybe under good intentions, but sometimes we had land that was kept safe. Yeah. Neatawanta? Yeah, I'm not familiar, but I believe you. Was Neatawana? I'm not familiar with the literal translation. It's a word that I've heard before. You know, there's a camp that was up here in Neatawana, and to be honest, I could get that for you and have it circulated. We have some fluents that teach at our tribe and would help guide me through this.
This is a question out of ignorance. You were saying that tribal land had been whittled down to 12 acres, and then we've done purchasing. Can you kind of explain for those of us who don't know, when you reacquire that land and you said that it can go into trust, how does that work? For example, you know, private residences and schools. Can you tell a little bit about?
Like for our schools or our private residences?
Yeah.
So the tribe has several acres today that are in trust, and when we purchase a home, this is a complex thing historically, but today there's banks that understand how to navigate the system. So if I want to buy a house on trust land, what happens is I don't get sold the dirt. But the truth is, none of us ever really do. You know, that's a myth. I own a home. I own a home in Traverse City. I'm paying a bank for a home in Traverse City. But once I'm done paying for it, I'm still going to be paying like $230 a month rent to Traverse City. And if I don't do that, via the local tax, homestead, they're going to come take it. So you never really own it. So as a tribal citizen, if I was to get a home on the reservation, they would assign a lot to me. And we currently have a policy, you get one lot. Have no lot signed to me, and that's like a lifetime lease, a 99-year lease. And I can get my own funding for a home and have it built, or I can borrow. And there's a few banks out there that understand how to work with a citizen on that. And they build their home, but so say if my wife is non-tribal, not a member of the Grand Traverse Band, if something were to happen to me, she'd still have a lifetime lease to that land, so she could stay in the house. But unfortunately, when that leaves her hands, the title has to go to the hands of another tribal member. So that's also been something difficult, and that's something to, during my 2 terms, trying to explain to the community, especially since we're spread out. You know, people normally think of our headquarters, the Shabbytown, but we have land in Benzie, Antrim, Charlevoix, and Grand Traverse. So we're kind of like sprinkled. If all that land was just in one spot like it was originally intended, it'd be a lot easier to govern and build a market and develop a village and a town. Currently, we have something where, like, if you try to make a change in the Shabbytown, Charlevoix wants to know why they're not getting something. There's only so many resources. You try to do something in Charlevoix, Benzie says, well, what about us? So we're trying to figure out how to make that happen, and at the same time trying to tell everybody, like, look, the only way to sell your home is to sell it to another tribal member. Another tribal member is not going to want your house if there's nothing here. You know, so, like, if you're trying to get a tribal member whose parents had fled, you know, to find work, and they were raised in Flint because that's where there was work, to get them to come interested in coming home and buying your house for a profit, it would, you know, there's got to be some. Does it go back into trust? Well, yeah. I mean, the tribe doesn't want the house, but that has happened. We have bought like a tribal member's home before and then put it into our housing department, which is basically just like any other public housing department. So now it's one of the units in the inventory to be either put up for low-income housing or market rental, like market rate for people that don't own a home yet. Yeah. Okay. That's a really great question. So, yeah, so for everybody at home, you might not have heard is he's asking about tribal membership and how does someone become enrolled? How is the membership determined? And for most tribes, it's by something that I think is awful, and it's exclusive, and it hurts my feelings. But we're probably the only people that have to prove our pedigree. I have a card. I left my wallet in my car. It's a tribal ID. And it shows you that I'm at least 1/4 Native American. And in order to be a citizen of the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, in our Constitution, you have to be at least 25% Native American blood, and at least 1/8 of that needs to be Michigan, Ottawa, or Chippewa blood. And so, for instance, there's discrepancies in a lot of people's genealogy. My mom's a genealogist, has been my whole life, so I've always been made aware of any Native girl I was interested in, exactly how I was related to her. So I married a Swedish girl from Minnesota. But because of some discrepancies up the line, you know, there's up the bloodline where somebody was born Odawa but died black. So, you know, down the line, my dad doesn't get listed as 100% Odawa. And so my children, not being a full 25%, are not tribal members. However, my youngest, that's why I say, like, there's traditionally, he doesn't have that political affiliation to a native tribe. He's part of the community, wears his hair long, braids it. My other son learned the language growing up. And, they both have been given their names in ceremony. So nothing political stops that. But there are tribes out there, the Sault Ste. Marie tribe, band of Ojibwe, they go on lineage. So if you have a parent that's in the tribe, you're a tribal member. And I think that's more inclusive and exactly how it should be. And I'd go one further and say that we're separate tribal nations based on bands. So we're a band of families that were in a geographical location when a census came through. So our tribe goes by what we call the Durant rolls. I forget Durant's first name, but Mr. Durant came through, he did a census. Say what? Jimmy Durant, no. Make him sound like he came from New York. So somebody might have been just happened to be downstate partying. And he came through, did the census, is like, oh, you're Saginaw Chippewa. That's it, like everybody got, based on where they were at. But another definition of like tribes is really, Odawa is a tribe. Ojibwe is a tribe. And these separate bands are now known as tribes, but we're really just these smaller sovereigns of a larger tribe. And if only we would have been recognized as the larger tribe, so if the Odawa was just one large tribe, then the borderline, because a lot of us might be part Odawa, but our parents came from Canada. Well, the United States of America doesn't recognize that blood. So like you could be Odawa, but not a tribal member here because that's not like United States blood. And well, we didn't make that border. Like ours, you got Michigan, our border went like this. Like that's where, and if we would have been able to organize as one nation like that, there might actually be a little bit more power and a little bit more say in how we are as an inclusive nation. Yes, sir. Yes, our tribe normally stays at about 41 to 4,200 members. Yes, yep. Our constitution does have a 6-county service area, and that was kind of required under the organization to get reaffirmed. And so we have 6 counties that we call our service area, and that's because of a treaty in 1924. Somebody will correct me if I'm wrong soon, but the Snyder Act had recognized that there were so many treaties made with every tribe, 588 tribes or so in the United States. So many treaties had been made, and all of them said something different. And part of these treaties said, like, we need your health care. There were things like, a lot of times we say, well, the colonists came here and they killed us. Well, sometimes the things that killed us, you didn't intend to. You brought domesticated cats with you. And from Europe, you guys have been immune to the illnesses that these domesticated animals had. We didn't. And so, we got sick, we brought colds, other things that had been on that continent that you had built immunity to, we didn't have yet. So a lot of times that was killing us. And so part of the treaties were, we need your health care. You guys know how to deal with this particular sickness. We need help with that. And so the Snyder Act had just said, hey, look, there's too many treaties. We're going to give health care we're going to recognize that we owe health care to every federally recognized tribe in the United States. And it functions probably exactly and maybe even as efficiently as the VA. Where every veteran is owed universal health care, but we've missed the mark big time on it. And it's the same with the Indian Health Services. It's never, there was an old saying that said, don't get sick after June. And if you can figure out what that means, is that the federal government runs out of money by then. So, can't operate that clinic anymore. Luckily for us, for Grand Traverse Band at least, and some of the rest of the Michigan tribes, we're not in such a remote area where the casinos are a viable source of an economic engine to help offset the healthcare that isn't provided and helps pay for our governmental programs. Yeah, where do you get the Yeah, marry an Indian.
When Gail told us about you possibly coming to be a speaker, one of the things that really interested me was the fact that you not only are on your tribal council, but also on the Traverse City Council. And I'm just curious as to how it is to live in, have a foot in both worlds, so to speak.
I've been waiting to tell somebody. They're incredibly stiff and rigid, and they're all good people. Like I've talked to them, but like our meetings, like it's not a lot of joking, not a lot of humor. That I was like, man, our tribal council's always like cracking jokes. You get business done, but it's not have to be so serious. At that function that I spoke in last week, I had said that another commissioner had offered up the idea of a land acknowledgement set at city commission meetings. That's cool. And I applaud Traverse City for making the effort. I know that their intentions are in the right place. Sometimes no matter the intention, I'm not sure I always want the attention, because I felt like I was in 5th grade again when we have social studies class and we were talking about the Native Americans, which often meant like the Pueblos and the Sioux. We don't learn about natives here. We learn about natives over there. And everybody in class turns their head to look at me. Me and my friend Keith, the Odawa kid and the Ojibwe kid in class. The teacher's like, Mark, you guys know about this, right? No, I barely know Odawa. I know about the Sioux. He's asked me about a completely different country. And so that's how I felt when they all, like, we're going to do a land acknowledgement. And I'm like sitting way at the end, and they all just like, Mark, do you think we could ask the tribe to write something? Now, I get that you want to write something. You want to make sure that it's sensitive, that it's correct, it's proper. But I did say, I went home and I told my wife, I said, no, if you just write the proper love letter, I'll read that to you. And that's how that made me feel. But no, their hearts are in the right place. I know it, and I acknowledge that it's good. Anything else, or
Maybe that's a great time to take a break. Please join me in thanking Mark to be part of that.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
So we do have a closing prayer. I'm afraid it is a Christian prayer.
I'm not afraid.
And I want to tell you, I'm in the midst of making maple syrup. I learned the other day that not tomorrow, but the day after is Maple Moon.
Yes, you are correct. And
so that's a tradition that the Native Americans gave to us, and I participated in it every year.
I will forward to Gail a flyer that's community-wide. Our Natural Resources Department has a sugar bush and sugar shack, and we like to share the process. So maybe if anybody's interested in one of those sessions.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer one more quick announcement before Barb closes us in prayer. I see cookies in the back. Laura's doing this. So that's, I guess, cookies. Announcement number 1. Announcement number 2 is that several folks in this group have already, the Racial Justice Working Group have been through a training that Title Track Michigan offers that I'm a part of the facilitation team for, called Understanding Racial Justice. If you've been through that, will you raise your hand as like a resource? If you want to know what that's like, go talk to these people. The next cohort begins the first week of April. It's a 5-week series that meets once a week for 2 hours and is really an incredibly deep dive, not only to history, but also how do we embody something different, right? So this particular course wants to invite us into understanding key concepts around racism and colonialism and white supremacy. And it also invites us into how do we practice and embody something different. So if you're looking for a particular way to take a next step or to take action around these kinds of issues, I invite you into that class. You can find it at titletrackmichigan.org, I'm not sure, titletrackmichigan.something. And I'm also happy to help link you up with it if you're having trouble finding it. So Barb, will you close us in prayer?
Don't get nervous, it's not that long. So I'm going to use the words of St. Francis. And I may be a little bit nervous about that because I tweaked just a little bit, and there's so many pastors in here that I know they're going to know. And I know that you will all recognize the words. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, healing. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, and it is dying, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Thank you, Lord, for this gathering and sharing of such important words and stories, both historical and current. May we remember and move forward as called by God. Where there is injury, may we all work to bring healing and forgiveness. May we keep the prayer of St. Francis in our hearts and on our lips. Please go in safety and in peace. Amen.